Hi, everyone. We are going to talk about motivation today. The reason we're going to talk about this is because when I ask people when they join the group what they're hoping to get out of it, the term motivation comes up a ton. And it makes sense, right? When we're not being productive, there's some assumptions that are made, especially about procrastinators. It's almost like, oh, we must be slackers, or maybe we don't care. If I cared, I'd be really productive. And I think it's almost a way of just kind of being hard on ourselves. And so I'm not 100% sure. I'm not totally convinced that procrastinators aren't motivated. I think it's more complicated than that. But let's step back and look at the concept of motivation and what role it might be playing. Oops, I have the wrong kind of agenda thing up. So I should be showing motivation. There we go. I like to model how you don't have to be perfect by messing up a lot. So first I'm going to just talk about some specific questions that were in the group. So Cassandra says, I have a lot of problems with preferring to procrastinate. I just want to pause and say, I don't know, that sounds that sounds harsh, like you're actually choosing and you prefer to procrastinate. Anyways, maybe you do, but maybe not. And so you prefer to procrastinate and then do things all at once. As I feel like it takes up less time. Do you have any suggestions? How could I condition myself to start doing things ahead of time? So it is super interesting how under pressure we somehow get like a burst of energy to just get things done that otherwise we wouldn't have. So I feel like that is an interesting phenomenon. I think it's just getting to the point where we can't care too much anymore. We have to just do it. But something interesting about your question is, how can I condition myself to start doing things differently or doing it ahead of time? So during this talk, just kind of listen up or listen out for the idea of conditioning ourselves. So with motivation, it's often thought of we're motivated to avoid bad things or go towards good things. So it's kind of a little bit of a behavioralist type of idea. Anyways, which involves conditioning. Laura Jane says, I struggle with actually committing to the schedule I make. I can write it out and plan to do it, but when it comes time, I procrastinate or panic. So that's super common, right? We know how to make a schedule, and that's what is kind of frustrating sometimes. Feels like we should be able to do things because we know how. And then at the time we panic and we don't, so it's a little bit confusing. So looking for suggestions to stay on track and commit to checking and following it each day. So I think that your whole question speaks to how complicated procrastination is. So it involves scheduling, it involves motivation, but it also involves some hard choices in the moment. And so I think we'll touch on a little bit of that today. So yeah, both questions kind of hit on the idea that we can't just get started when we want to, I guess. So let's talk about motivation. What is motivation? So in terms of like the basic psychological constructs of motivation, we talk usually about intrinsic motivation. So that is anything that we actually enjoy doing. So we're motivated to do it because we like it. We like doing it in the moment. So if you've ever felt like really in the zone with a project at school, like maybe you really like a class, it's easy to get done because you're stoked to actually do the work in the moment. That would be an intrinsically motivated thing. An easier example would be something like when we're distracting ourselves. We might be intrinsically motivated to watch Netflix or play video games because we actually enjoy that in the moment. It makes us happy. And then, so the other type, that's intrinsic, and then the other type is extrinsic. And so extrinsic motivation is when we're completing a task because we know it will lead to something we like. So one example, maybe like say asking someone out on a date. It's like the actual act act of asking them isn't exactly fun. Maybe we're nervous, maybe we think it might go wrong and it's horrifying, but we might do it because the outcome would be worth it. And similar to schoolwork, usually when we're talking about doing assignments, it's usually extrinsic motivation. Like, it's not like, oh, I love writing this paper. It's, yeah, I get that this paper is important for a number of reasons. And those different reasons are something we'll go into a little more now. So, different types of motivation to get school work done. And we're kind of assuming that we're talking about extrinsic motivation. So, motivation that we muster up to get through something to get to a good outcome, not motivation to do something we love. So, there's an interesting study that looked at all different types of motivation. So, about schoolwork, about being productive at school. So they looked at things like motivation to avoid bad grades, or motivation to get good grades, motivation to get praise, motivation to avoid negative judgment. And every single one, there's a number of them, was related to being productive and not procrastinating, except avoiding disappointing others. So I thought that was super interesting. I wasn't really expecting that, but it makes sense, because if we're focused maybe on a negative outcome that involves letting someone down, that can really be scary, and that can get us stuck. So yeah, it's interesting. Anyways, so the bottom line with all this talk about motivation is that if you find something important to you about getting the work done, so it can be as broad as like, I want to get good grades because if I get into this program later, I know I'll love my job in the future. Or it can be something more specific, which is what I would suggest. So looking at the individual assignment and being like, how may this actually help me with something I do care about? So for example, I had to go through a lot of statistics homework as a psych major and for grad school. So I hate math, and I had to really talk myself into it. So I kind of stood back and I thought to myself, okay, you know what? Like, research is important, and maybe it's funny now because I did a quick lit review before I did this talk and found some new interesting studies about motivation. And I guess I thought, you know what? If I want to stay really current with treatment, I need to know and understand research really well. And so that's a way I kind of made myself value what I had to learn. So if you can find something that you value about the task you have to do, that would be motivation. So I put it in quotes like that because I feel like motivation may be a little bit blown out of proportion in terms of importance. I guess, let's see if I can explain that a bit better. But here's my next thing. Does it sound too simple? So if it is simple, that means if school is important to you, you'll want to do schoolwork. Well, I am willing to bet that if you're watching this, that means school is important to you and you want to do this work. Yet you still find yourself getting stuck, feeling stuck. So I think the role for me when I work with people and develop a really custom plan for them for getting the work done and getting through those moments of not wanting to do it but doing it anyways, the role that values play and motivation play is a small part of a big picture. So, for example, let's take someone's example from before, just to tie it back. So let's see, Laura Jane, looking for suggestions to stay on track and commit to checking. Okay. Actually, maybe the other one is easier. So how can I condition myself to start doing things ahead of time? So I prefer to procrastinate, Cassandra says. I feel like it takes up less time. So in the moment, sitting down to do homework, maybe we are saying, oh, I don't want to do this. And so part of getting over that hump in the moment, is maybe looking at what we're saying to ourselves and having some evidence to combat that thought. So if we're saying, I don't want to do this, that's really simple. And we can argue against that, saying, you know what, I don't feel like doing this in the moment, but this is important to me. And here's why. And you have your values lined out. Like, I really want to be a nurse and I need to know how to read these charts or whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about, but that kind of thing. So you can say, maybe I don't want to do it right now, but overall it is important. So that little piece of evidence against the idea that you don't want to do it or you're not going to do it right now, that's the role that I feel like values play. And when I talk about the larger picture of everything that goes into procrastination. So anyways, yeah, I guess motivation, for me, that covers it, because I feel as though motivation is overstated. I feel like a lot of people are motivated, but they think I must not be if I'm not being productive. And it's kind of like maybe a stigma against people that are struggling. Because I don't think most university students are lazy. They're just feeling stuck. And it's really hard to get unstuck sometimes. And we can be hard on ourselves. And I feel like taking that shame out of the equation is another thing to consider. Yeah, it's just usually not helpful to also like say, oh, I must be lazy or not motivated. So just be gentle with yourselves. You probably are motivated, but it will be helpful to figure out exactly what motivates you about doing a given assignment. So anyways, I hope that was helpful today. Thanks for joining me. The group is still growing like crazy, and I'm stoked on that. Yeah, if you have any thoughts on this video or thoughts for future topics, comment below. That'd be awesome. Okay. Bye, guys.